A man's secret existence is shattered by dangerous men trying to steal his identity. When one of them offers his hot wife, he wonders if he should keep his anonymity or give it up for love. One morning in Tokyo, the box man quietly observes the busy streets. As the passing pedestrians ignore him, he intently watches them through a peephole. He believes the carton lets him see the world differently, since it erases his identity. Inside it, he can exist without life's inconveniences. When a woman discerns that he isn't just a box, she checks back to confirm and hurriedly walks away. He reflects that while some people recognize his presence, they pretend he isn't there. Just then, he gets a glimpse of myself, a professional photographer, snapping pictures of him from a distance. Anyone who becomes overly aware of him becomes the box man himself. He immediately leaves his spot and slowly creeps through a vacant alley. When he sees his arch enemy, the Wapan beggar, waving a flag overhead, he stands up and frantically runs past the crowds while the stranger follows him. The box man finds his way on the side streets, but myself catches up to him and takes more photos. Eventually, he escapes into a dirt road and settles beside an industrial plant. He sleeps inside the box and wakes up the next morning, relishing his isolation and anonymity. In the meantime, an unlicensed medical practitioner known as the fake doctor shows video surveillance of the box man to the general, a retired veteran doctor he works for. He attends to his mentor's worsening ailment and advises him to prepare a proper will. The old man reveals that he once thought of taking his life, but he didn't want to die deceiving the world. So, he entrusts his servant with a document and says he's leaving him with the truth. As the box man writes his reflections on how he must learn to overcome discomforts like pain and itching, the Wapan beggar slings a rock at him. He flees, but his nemesis pursues him, forcing him to fight desperately for his survival. When the pauper lunges at him with a spear, the fake doctor disables him with a rifle. The gunman takes his turn chasing him, but he takes pictures as evidence of the attempt on his life. While the box man prints negatives of the sniper and inspects them, Yoko, a fake nurse who works for the general, tells him there's a hospital nearby. The kind woman drops an envelope into his peephole and walks away. Unable to see her face, he compares her legs to the other photos he's taken, though he doesn't recognize her. When he finds a map and some money in the packet, he leaves the cardboard to seek medical attention, unaware that Yoko and the fake doctor are the ones treating him. They claim to give him a local anesthetic, but they inject him with a sedative instead, causing him to drift into sleep and dream. In the past, the patient used to be myself, a professional photographer who was unhappy with his life. One day, he saw the box man outside his home and immediately recognized him. He took out his prints and realized he previously snapped a picture of him in a Tokyo alley. Worried for his safety, he shot the enigmatic character and cautiously approached it. While he discovered a blood trail, he didn't find anything besides a handwritten journal. Over time, he found it harder to deny the box man's existence and assumed his identity. In the hospital, myself wakes up to Yoko asking about his job and his injuries. He says he's a photographer, although the person who hurt him wasn't wearing a carton. He adds that the box man might be someone he knows, and that he's probably a skilled lensman who captures the unseen parts of Tokyo and bears one's soul with his camera. Yoko mentions she won't mind if he takes photos of her since she used to be a model who removes her clothes in front of spectators. She shares that when a client got her pregnant, she almost died from complications. Thankfully, the doctor saved her life and let her work as a nurse despite lacking credentials. Myself wonders if he holds that favor over her head, but she doesn't answer him directly and says that she loves her new job because it makes her feel useful. The woman then asks him to inform the box man that she wants to buy his cardboard. As he's leaving the hospital, she firmly grabs his arm and begs for his help. The fake nurse reports to her husband, who then picks a dress for her and leads her to the lab. She reluctantly visits the general, who places her hair in his mouth and tells her not to worry since everything she's experiencing is just a figment of her imagination. Myself retrieves the cardboard to reclaim his identity and record his discovery. He knows that the man who treated him is the assassin, though he's unsure of Yoko's true intentions. When the fake doctor returns to the laboratory, he finds his employer inside a cardboard. The old man insists that he spend time in one so he'll know what it feels like to be the box man. However, the fraudster adamantly refuses his request because he doesn't think it's necessary. The general then takes off his box to gather his papers and carelessly throws them to his servant. He says he's ready to become the box man and wonders how long he has to wait for the carton. As the fake doctor prepares to leave with the nurse, the veteran taunts them that they too will become real if they wait longer. Once they're alone, he profusely apologizes to his wife and promises her that it'll soon be over. The woman reveals that since her husband's involvement with the box man, he's changed. However, the imposter ignores her concern and instead shows her a video of myself engrossed in a notebook. Curious, the fake nurse asks the doctor if he'll also wear a cardboard like the general. He responds that if it will help him create the perfect crime, it might be necessary. That night, myself safely stores his journal and the negatives to prove that the fake doctor is responsible for the box man's demise. As he safekeeps the evidence, Yoko slips him some cash and instructions on the cardboard's disposal. On her way back, he intercepts her to return the envelope, but the nurse insists he should hold on to it and keep his end of the deal. When he asks if that's what she truly wants, she implies that no one knows where the truth lies. Later that evening, he spies on the couple from outside the windows. He notices the doctor with a replica of his carton, commanding Yoko to reenact her earlier encounter with the general. She says the old man told her to remove her garments and that she was more afraid than usual because she couldn't see his face. Her husband reassures her not to be scared because they're only recreating the events. When the fake nurse moves across the room, the photographer uses a mirror to get a closer look without being seen. She recalls he offered her beer and that she drank it without any clothes. Yoko remembers he ate a cactus while inside the box and asks her husband to do the same. She noticed the veteran's behavior became more suspicious afterward, but the doctor explains he consumed a harmless species that had no effect on his mind. She discloses the general asked her to give him enemas and to come close because her smell excited him. Eventually, he requested her to get down on all fours and watched her from behind. The fake nurse reminds the doctor he needs to try it himself, so she prepares an enema and gives him one. As she recounts these events, myself gets up and looks through the window to get a clear view of her. He pleasures himself as he watches the woman goad her husband to sniff her like a dog. After witnessing their intimate roleplay, he immediately flees the scene, while the fake doctor stays in his cardboard to ruminate on the experiment. The quack eventually shares his thoughts with his wife. He realizes it isn't the act of observing that makes the box man who he is, but what he writes in his notebook. At the beach, the recluse wonders what motivates the charlatan to manipulate Yoko. I think fondly of the woman and believe the depraved acts she's forced to commit don't suit her. He compares her to the light shining through the tunnel's exit and wonders if she can help him shed his box. When he falls asleep from exhaustion, the fake doctor sedates him and steals his journal. In his office, the fraudster successfully copies the general's handwriting. He then burns myself's notes and spends the night replacing them with forgeries in the veteran's hand. Myself meets with the fake doctor at the general's lab the following day. He returns the money he received for the carton and reminds him there can only be one boxman in a city. Aware of his fondness for Yoko, the imposter requests his wife to remove her clothes and proposes to leave her in his care. He quotes some lines from the diary, which surprises the photographer. When the man asks if she's acting against her wishes, she says she can stop unraveling if he's uncomfortable, or he can take pictures of her if he wants. The fake doctor clarifies that the nurse is a clever woman who makes her own choices and doesn't take orders from anyone, but he can enjoy her as he pleases if he agrees to their deal. Myself rejects the offer and reveals a photo of the previous attempt on his life. He then challenges the assassin to finish what he started and pounces at him without warning. A battle ensues, and the men chase each other across the laboratory. When the photographer charges at the defenseless doctor, Yoko uses her body as a shield and stops the attack. Suddenly, The fraudster is confused about what's happening and asks the boxman who he is and what he's currently doing. Myself explains he's fighting with him and that he's going to win. The quack wonders who wrote this part of the story because he recalls reading it in the journal. According to the photographer, he's the writer, and the fake doctor is a product of his delusion. He says this awareness is proof he's the real boxman, but when the imposter implies that he may be the one writing it, the general appears behind the peephole and claims this is his story. The charlatan continues to ramble that someone else may be inventing their tale, and myself strikes him dead. When the attacker removes the cardboard to see who's under it, he's perplexed to find a stranger and begins to question his own identity. The fake doctor wakes up in his study the next day. He tells Yoko that he's creating a story about a deranged person who becomes the boxman and accidentally falls to his death at sea. The nurse cautions her husband to be careful and to simply let the general die naturally, but he wants to use the tampered journal to cover their tracks and have an alibi for their crimes. His wife watches worriedly as he returns to the desk to write a confession scenario. Meanwhile, a detective investigates an old man who washes up ashore. In her report, she states that evidence suggests he died of drowning and might have fallen to the sea by accident. Before the tragedy, local residents had seen a homeless man wandering in a box. The remains were found wrapped in a similar cardboard, along with a thick diary and a watch. During questioning, the fake doctor reveals that the general was a veteran physician who shifted to private practice and that he had long wanted to take his own life. He explains that his mentor was researching a plant and regularly tested it on himself when he caught a strange illness that worsened over time. As he became less capable of performing his duties, he was forced to take over his responsibilities at the hospital, despite lacking a license. When the detective calls him out for hiding information, the fraudster discloses that the general had threatened to expose his illegal practice if he didn't supply him with more painkillers. The old man also asked him to offer his wife, and made her perform lewd acts. He tells the investigator that his employer's behavior has become increasingly erratic, and he'd walk around in a box. The woman silently walks up to him, and he suddenly finds himself back in his office as he rips the confession story he'd been writing. The fake doctor wears the box and visits the general to inform him that the conditions he requested for the drowning are ready. He reproaches the old man for threatening to expose him and for playing with him and his wife. He realizes it will be impossible to cover their tracks if they follow through with the plan. But if he takes the life of the veteran and becomes the boxman, then it will be the perfect crime. The doctor then strangles his mentor and takes on his new identity. As he's leaving the hospital, Yoko confronts him, and he tells her they are now both free of their burdens. Meanwhile, myself wakes up on the beach and finds his box torn by the sea, so he pieces it together and wears it. He later comes across the imposter, who says he's the real boxman. When the fake doctor returns his journal and advises him to search it for answers, the photographer remarks that he's the one who wrote it. However, the man says that maybe someone else wrote it and walks away. Myself flips through the pages of his notebook and visits the nurse at the hospital. In her room, he expresses his disappointment that the fake doctor has become the real boxman. When Yoko tells him to take off his carton, he asks if she can lend him clothes because he isn't wearing any. She laughs at his embarrassment and gives him some garments, then says it's his turn to experience being watched. The nurse draws the curtains for privacy and instructs him to come out. As sunlight shines behind the woman, myself gazes at her and realizes she really is the exit to the tunnel. He slowly emerges and throws his diary, then whisks Yoko towards the exit. However, he changes his mind as they're running and covers the windows with cardboard, wanting to lock the entire world in a box. The couple returns to the nurse's room to enjoy its silence and isolation. She slowly unravels her clothes, and he stands up to embrace her. After myself gently lays her on the floor, they make love while holding each other's hands. Yoko wonders about the future, but the man doesn't know, and they fall asleep together. She wakes up and discovers he's obsessed with his journal again, so she leaves him. After finishing his writing, he sheds the carton from his clothes and reflects on his past. While he admits to failing as the boxman, he has no regrets over the choices he made. He was saddened by his love's departure, but he understood her decision. Myself believes she didn't escape and simply entered a larger box, where she is now lost. The man passes through the laboratory and ruminates as he tries to find his way out of the hospital. He's learned that the more you struggle with your box, the more mazes you create inside of you, and soon you'll end up in a dark world without any exit. Outside, Myself gets caught in a confusing warren of narrow streets. When he catches a glimpse of Yoko passing by, he follows her trail and eventually sees her in an open space. However, when he approaches the woman, she disappears, and he suddenly finds himself surrounded by people inside boxes, gawking at him through their peepholes. Confused, he steps back and bumps into another cardboard behind him. When Myself peeks into it, he learns there's an audience watching him from a movie theater. The photographer realizes that people have been observing him this whole time, feeling joy and despair as they enjoy the view by themselves. He concludes that spectators have created his world, and his story is nothing more than a product of their imagination. Surprised by the discovery, Myself backs away and doesn't take his eyes off the carton, now fully aware that the real boxman is you.